Okay, greetings everyone. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ms. Covell, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, Planner Breezy, can you take roll call?
Commissioner Covell?
Here.
Commissioner Lopez?
Here.
Vice Chair Furtick?
Here.
I would like to point out that Chair Warner and Commissioner Anderson are absent from this evening's meeting.
Okay, I'll open this up to public forum. This is an opportunity for the public to address the commission on items of interest that are not listed on the agenda. And because of restrictions on the Brown Act, the commission may not engage in a discussion or take action on matters not described on the agenda. And each speaker has 4 minutes. Would anyone like to get up to public forum? I will note, I'm not seeing any, but I will note that we did have one letter submitted, which actually thanked the Director McHale and her staff for the community meeting last week on short-term rentals. I want to echo those sentiments and thank the staff as well for a really productive meeting. Next item on the agenda are consent items, and we have none, so I'll move on to the public hearing, 5.1. Does the staff have a presentation?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Furtick. Lisa McKyle, Director of Community Development. This item was before the commission, I think about a month ago, and staff looked at some of the feedback that was given and also reevaluated the proposal and the amendment, and staff is bringing this back to the commission because additional clarifications we felt were necessary. It's important to note this isn't an overhaul of an entire section of the ordinance, but really a clarification, and it's based on some interpretations that existed prior to me being here at the city and were in motion, and so staff's continuing on that effort and allowing that clarification to continue through the process. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Senior Planner Jackie O'Neill, and she'll provide a presentation.
Thank you, Director McKyle, and thank you, Commissioners. So I'll get right into this. So we're bringing back the on-site storage facilities zoning ordinance amendment 26002. So why is this item coming back? At the April 21st, 2026 Planning Commission recommendation, the Planning Commission adopted a resolution that amended the definition of on-site storage facilities and also added a CUP requirement for on-site storage facilities to be conditionally permitted within the CB and MU districts. And subsequent staff review identified a conflict between the proposed April definition and the accessory use framework. On-site storage facilities are regulated only as an accessory use throughout the municipal code. There's a separate use definition for storage personal that regulates storage-oriented businesses. The prior definition that was recommended by staff and ultimately adopted by the Planning Commission created a conflict with the primary use and accessory use framework. And the definition is refined to clarify that routine business storage is not an on-site storage facility. Therefore, a CUP requirement in the CB and MU districts is no longer necessary or warranted. And so just reminding everyone, what is the issue at hand? What the issue that was identified by staff is that the current definition in the zoning code is too broad. This is the current definition. On-site storage facilities means the indoor or outdoor storage of any materials, products, or equipment on the premises. And in the code context, this could unintentionally capture routine business storage, which we certainly don't want to create a situation where our business owners might think that they're not allowed to have any on-site storage. And again, storage personal is a separately regulated storage-oriented land use that's identified as an allowed use in the industrial district. So the proposed amendment before you tonight is to revise the definitions. The prior definition identified on-site storage facilities as a primary or dominant land use, so that's where the conflict with the accessory use framework comes in. Here's the revised definition that's before you this evening and in the draft resolution. On-site storage facilities, the indoor or outdoor storage of materials, products, or equipment on the premises. This definition does not include the storage of goods, inventory, materials, or equipment that are sold, utilized, produced, or maintained as part of a primary use when such storage is incidental and subordinate to that use. And staff recommends retaining the clarifying footnote in the use table for the commercial districts. And so again, this footnote would just repeating what's in the definition to create clarity when people are looking at uses. I did do some research in the code. I know something that came up at our prior meeting was the use of incidental or subordinate or secondary. Those words are actually used interchangeably throughout the code and even in the accessory use section. So if the commission wishes to look at this last sentence of this, which says incidental and subordinate, I think we would be fine to have incidental, subordinate, secondary, or to keep it as is, or to use all three of those words as you wish. So I just really wanted to clarify examples of the types of storage. So this amendment would clarify that permitted storage includes restaurant supplies, store inventory, or like a small equipment shed that's serving a permitted primary business. Natalie, can you? There we go. And that personal storage, which requires a conditional use permit in the industrial district, the definition here would really be related to a mini storage or self-storage facility like you see in the photo. And these are photos from the internet. These are not photos from our city. So the staff's revised recommendation will clarify the intent of the municipal code, resolve ambiguity for business owners, maintain our existing development standards, and avoid unnecessary discretionary review for secondary or incidental storage. No changes are proposed to the accessory structure requirements, the screening requirements, or general on-site storage regulations. In the staff report, it is mentioned that staff explored the question that came up at the April meeting regarding setbacks. In the commercial zoning district, side and rear setbacks are generally 0 feet unless they're abutting a residential district. So there's really no issue there as far as concerns about would we really not be allowing any on-site storage. It would be allowed in the commercial districts as long as it's meeting the screening requirements that are in the code. And if they were proposing a separate accessory structure, we would be looking at the design requirements for that for the zoning district. So the recommendation before you this evening is to find that the project is to exempt and to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt zoning ordinance amendment 26002. I do want to clarify that this is a new resolution, so this will supersede the resolution that was adopted in April. And I'm available for any questions, as is Director Mikhail, and thank you for receiving the presentation this evening.
Great. Well, thank you so much for making this amendment even better and for identifying, anything that was ambiguous. Does any commissioners have any questions of the staff? No? Then I will turn it over to public hearing. Is anyone in the audience interested in getting up and speaking on this topic?
Through the Vice Chair, just a matter of formality, you're opening the public hearing.
I am opening the public hearing. Thank you. Okay, seeing none, I will close public hearing and turn it back to the commissioners for deliberation. Are there any comments or questions?
My only comment is thank you for making this super clear and that businesses can use storage. And I think this came up because businesses were thinking they couldn't put storage in, and they need storage, like restaurants and, for dry goods and things like that. So I am glad that this has been amended so that businesses can continue to conduct their work and that they don't have to worry about this. So thank you.
I also think that it was a lot. This is a lot cleaner and a lot more understandable. With the other verbiage, it was a little more difficult to understand what they're able to do, and it kind of has been clarity. So, good work on it.
Great. So I will have just one comment for even further clarification. I'd like to see the language is, I think we can, the language on the definition, I'd like to suggest that it reads, and can we put that slide up so people can see that? Okay. So I am on the revised definition. Let me see. I want to suggest
It's
that
on the overhead too, if it's helpful for anybody.
hard for me to see that far, but I have it right here. Okay, so it says this definition does not include the storage of goods, inventory, materials, or equipment that are sold, utilized, produced, or maintained as part of the permitted primary use. I suggest we put a period at the end of use and then create another sentence. Again, I think it's just for readability, would make it a little more clear, and then say, storage is defined as incidental, let's see, how does this read? Yes, storage is defined as incidental and subordinate to the permitted use, something of that nature.
So through the vice chair, we'll need a motion, a second. You would want to make the motion based on that revised language that you would read. And then that would be a recommendation, just for clarity and transparency. That's going to be a recommendation to the city council that you would appear in the resolution.
Yes.
Staff will evaluate whether it agrees or not, but it's at the pleasure of the commission.
Yes.
Can I say something, Sue?
Sure.
Chair? The revised definition is for on-site storage facilities. Facilities being the slide where it was like more of the storage facility, the roll-up doors and storing your stuff you can't fit in your garage, right? So I think this revised definition is trying to say this is on-site storage facilities, the indoor or outdoor storage of materials, products, or equipment on the premises. This definition does not include the storage of goods. So it's trying to say this is what on-site storage is. That's a facility. And this does not include, just to clarify, this is not including like incidental and subordinate. I'm not really sure if the period helps, because I don't want to confuse the definition of on-site facilities with the definition of what the alternate storage is. I just, you know what I mean? Like,
Through the chair,
Yeah.
Senior Planner O'Neill, I would like to point out that storage personal is a separately defined primary use that actually has, it's quite lengthy. I can read it if you would like, but that actually defines mini warehouses, personal storage, things of that nature. This definition that has been proposed is really just trying to clarify that incidental storage with a permitted primary use doesn't require a CUP or isn't, limited in some way.
yeah. So, sorry, the personal use one, could you read that one just so that we know which that definition says?
Yes, please give me just one moment and
Okay.
I'll have that ready.
And you're saying that is a different definition for like,
That's a different definition. It is in 17.33 definition of uses. It is identified as a primary use in the industrial district only. It's not, I did not locate it anywhere else in the code. And the definition for storage personal means a facility offering enclosed storage with individual access for personal effects and household goods, including mini warehouses and mini storage, and records or inventory storage for businesses. This classification includes moving company businesses which offer storage and transporting services, but excludes workshops, hobby shops, manufacturing, or commercial activities. And then the word storage also has its own definition. And I understand that this is something that we could look at in a larger context, but that would, I think, be opening up like all of the use definitions. So
I mean, is there a chance that on-site storage, the definition could just remove facilities? I mean, because there's already a whole separate facilities definition that was just that.
That's
a-
actually a really good point. We could just remove facilities since
I
it's
think-
really not a facility.
Through Vice Chair Furtick, I think that in your motion, you can recommend that. It'll be in the resolution. Staff will look at that because to accept that at a staff level right now wouldn't be prudent on our part. We need to go take that revision and go make sure that it's okay throughout the remainder of the code. But I think that that's a fantastic idea. But I would want to hear that you put that in your motion to keep, it sounds like I'm hearing, keep the definition as written here, but eliminate the word facility in your recommendation. That would need a second in your vote. And then we'll go look at that. And when we go to the city council, we'll either agree or disagree for whatever reasons, but we're not inclined to disagree at this moment.
Commissioner Lopez, do you have any comments on how this language, I think we all agree that the intent here, we agree with the intent, absolutely. It's just a matter of getting the language down so it's clear. And my reason for my suggested edit was so as not to confuse in the same sentence things that are defined as storage and things that are not defined as storage. That is why I wanted the break. I don't know if that makes any more sense.
No, it makes sense, and it's interesting to know that there's a whole other definition for storage and then a whole other definition for personal storage or something. So I think it's just getting these three storages defined so that people can use them without headache. That's kind of clarifying. I think the
So-
intent is that, right?
So do I hear a motion to approve the revised definition with some amendments?
Yes, but okay. I will try this. I motion to, can I say, accept the staff recommendation with the, I guess, I don't know if it's the word direction, but to just with the intent of further clarifying the definitions of storage. Either.
May I assist?
Sure, go,
Sure.
please. Yes.
If helpful, it sounds like what the commission is looking to do is to accept staff's recommendation and the recommended language, but recommend that the city council strike the word facilities. I need it to come back. Sorry. Strike the word facilities from the definition to provide additional clarity. That's what I think I heard from this definition.
Can I ask a question? When staff was writing this, I mean, these, obviously you got to take language from code and then with the planning, was that the intent? I mean, is this, I know you can't say right now, but is it going to cause, I know you can't say you oppose it or not, but I'm thinking you probably already looked at the language and tried to use what's proper on both sides, right?
Yeah, so for what it's worth, if I was having any immediate heartburn over this. I would let the commission know that there's some risk factors to consider here. I'm not having that, staff's not having that. It sounds like it's actually a really good alternative here for you all to take. So generally speaking, there's no heartburn. It's not a professional term, but we're going to do our due diligence on our part before it goes to the city council and make sure there's not some other conflict that we're not aware of in and throughout our code. Does that help? Okay.
So we have
To
a
accept what you
motion
said, yeah.
on the floor, and we need a second? Or is there more discussion?
Let's just clarify in the record that Commissioner Covell would like to make a motion based on Director McKayle's last,
Recommendation, and yes.
and you need a second for that.
And I'll second it.
Great, we take roll call.
Commissioner Covell,
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Furtick.
Yes,
The motion passes unanimously.
great. Thank you again, staff, for working on this. Okay, so now we move on to 5.2, which is actually being continued. It's the continuance of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance amendment. So we'll move to scheduled items. 6 point,
Through the chair, I do think you still need to take an action to continue it to a date certain, which would be July 7th. So it's a continuance. We're recommending that the commission continue the item, and that was at the request of Chair Warner and the fact that Commissioner Anderson's not here as well. So I do still need you to vote to.
okay, so, and do we need to make a motion to accept the continuance?
Yes.
So.
To a date certain of July 7th. And what that does is it means we don't have to send a public notice via paper to everyone.
Great.
Okay.
And do we have a motion?
I motion to continue the accessory dwelling unit ordinance amendment to the date certain of Planning Commission meeting July 7th, 2026.
I second it.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Covell,
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Furtick.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Great. Now we will move to scheduled items. 6.1, short-term rental ordinance study session. So there's a presentation by the staff?
Yes, thank you. Lisa McKyle, Director of Community Development. We have with us today myself available, as well as Natalie Breesy, who's going to do a presentation, and Senior Planner Jackie O'Neill as well for questions as they come up. But I do want to highlight that this is a study session. It's not necessarily a deliberation over the merits of the project from the commission's perspective. We're receiving a lot of comments. So this is the onset and early stage of a process. We had outreach last week, and Natalie would go over that in her presentation. We received a lot of great feedback from many different perspectives. And so this is an opportunity in another forum for the public to provide those same comments or additional comments, as well as the Planning Commission to hear the information. I did want to let the public and the commission know that the outreach video will eventually be online. We are a small team and starting these new technology improvements in our website. I'm not an IT person, but I'm certainly trying to become one. So we'll be making those improvements, and I'm hopeful that we'll have this information online for everybody to benefit from in the coming weeks here. With that being said, I'll hand it over to Assistant Planner Natalie Breesy, who will walk through this presentation. And again, just a reminder, you'll hear this a few times throughout this process. We're not deliberating over it. We're here to receive really good feedback so that we can balance what the desires are of the public, what the state law offers us, and what the city needs. So thank you, everybody, for your participation, and I'll hand it over to staff.
Thank you, Director McKyle. Good evening, Commissioners. As stated previously, we're going to go over the zoning ordinance amendment for short-term rental study session. I wanted to start off this evening to talk about what a short-term rental is. And by the definition in our code, the rental of any residential structure or any portion of any residential structure for occupancy for dwelling, lodging, or sleeping purposes for 30 days or fewer consecutive calendar days defines what a short-term rental is. So anything over 30 days would not be considered a short-term rental and doesn't fall under these guidelines. The purpose of the study session this evening is to review the city's existing short-term residential program, to discuss any potential changes or updates that collectively, whether it's the commission or the community, want to provide feedback on to staff. But the goal is to talk about what the things we're looking at, as well as things that the commission and the community have noticed as a whole are either working or not working thus far. But we're seeking feedback tonight on permit administration, compliance monitoring, rental activity reporting, permit availability, and geographic distribution standards of these short-term rental permits. Up on the screen, you can see a map of the currently active short-term rental permits. We have 23 active permits within city limits. There are 2 applications in process that will, if approved, would bring us up to our cap of 25. I can reference this slide back later on in the presentation as well if needed, but I wanted to include it just so we have our geographical view of the city. And then for anyone who is interested in this map, it is available on the city short-term rental website, as well as the list of permitted short-term rentals and their local contacts. And then there's also a link to a sheet that has kind of information on where to put in complaints or any issues with short-term rentals around you. So why review the ordinance? We are looking at this from the perspective of the city is doing an overall look at efficiency. And within our department, this has kind of brought up certain things that we're working on as staff that could either be done more efficiently or just the programming itself needs some help. And so these are the areas that we've identified as we've reviewed incoming projects that could have some potential for updates. So for program administration, we've noticed that there's an inconsistent renewal date timeline. So depending on when a short-term rental application was approved originally, that lays out their renewal dates going forward. So one thing that staff has kind of identified is that these are all being renewed at different timelines, and if we could simplify that by doing it at one time, that would be not only helpful to the applicants that are renewing, but also staff when the time comes. And that also goes into the resource-intensive permit tracking, because all departments do review renewals and new applications, so it would just kind of help everyone get on the same page. Compliance monitoring falls into this category as well. Currently, and I'll go into more depth later on, but currently it's self-reporting activity, limited availability for staff to identify the rental activity that has been going on. And then we've also identified some challenges confirming ongoing compliance between the renewal periods. The third thing that we've identified and why we want to review this ordinance is that our permit cap is close to being fully filled out. And we do have a lot of interest all the time about short-term rentals and how can I get a permit, and is there a wait list? Can I join the wait list? And so with so much interest, staff is open to talking about the possibility of potentially increasing that cap, how that would look, and wanting to get feedback on that. So our current permit availability is a cap of 25 short-term rental permits citywide. As I stated previously, we do have 23 active permits. The potential changes to the ordinance, as you can see on the left or right-hand side in green, would be a potential to do an incremental increase. For example, this a potential look of what this could possibly be is you could do a variety of different things, such as 5 new permits every year for the next 5 years. That's just one thing that we've want to talk about this evening. You could also look at it as a cap to the percentage of the housing stock. So like 1 or 2% of the housing stock could be the cap. It really just depends on how staff sees and the council ultimately sees fit going forward. On the left-hand side in blue, the current short-term rental program, the pie chart is showing in lime green, the current short-term rentals and the permit applications in relation to our housing stock as a total. According to our last housing element update, it was reported that there are 2,897 units. This was a couple years ago, so we have increased a little bit since then. I don't have those exact numbers today, but we're looking at, if we go over to the green section on the right, the potential changes to the ordinance, the increased cap we just did it off of 50, it would be roughly 1 to 2% of the housing stock. So out of that, based off of the previous housing element, so the 2,897 units. And then discussion points for this section would be to maintain the existing cap, which would be the 25 permits. Do an incremental increase potentially of these permits. As I mentioned before, a potential avenue for this would be 5 permits annually for 5 years. There's definitely other ways that we can look at this, but it would allow the city to monitor neighborhood impacts and programs before jumping to a full number, depending on what's the final decision on the increase. Or you could look at it as a housing stock-based cap. So it would be tied to the percentage of the city's housing stock by 1 to 2%. Operational requirements. On the left in the blue, we have our current short-term rental program. Currently, Planning Commission approval is required for all new short-term rental permits by public hearing. After that, each short-term rental is on a 2-year renewal period, and those are done administratively. If there are issues identified in the renewal process, they can be brought forward to another public hearing with the commission to determine if the short-term rental should cease or is allowed to continue. We currently have self-reporting with an honor system for the activities of permits. And there is an exemption currently in the ordinance that has an exemption for primary residences. They do not need to meet the 60-day minimum nightly rental per year. And then currently, short-term rentals are permitted in all residential and mixed-use zoning districts. Potential changes to the ordinance could be administrative review for new permits and renewals. We're also hoping to get feedback on the possibility of moving from biannual renewals to annual renewals. This would help with kind of just the oversight on if a short-term rental permit is not in compliance for a year, but then that second year they're catching up in compliance, it doesn't necessarily flag in the renewal portion, so it would kind of keep everyone honest from year to year. We're not really seeing any notes so far that I've seen that are sorry, I lost my train of thought. We're not really seeing this one way or another, but it is something we wanted to look at as staff. Something in the annual renewals would be enhanced reporting and verification. So the integration of reporting activity with TOT filings. And then the possibility of changing all rentals to meet the 60-day nightly requirement on a calendar basis. And then another potential item that we would like to talk about is establishing a 300-foot spacing requirement between short-term rentals. This would look like the potential boundaries of a short-term rental permit. It would be a 300-foot buffer from that boundary to any other short-term rentals to prevent clustering within neighborhoods. There are also opportunities created by a bill that became effective on January 1st, 2026, so this year. SB 346 authorizes local agencies to adopt ordinances requiring short-term rental platforms, for example, Airbnb, VRBO, to provide information necessary to administer and enforce local transient occupancy tax and short-term rental regulations. The tools that would be available to local agencies are reporting requirements. So these third parties would report directly to cities if adopted. And I don't know if I mentioned this previously, but this SB 346 would have to be adopted as a separate ordinance. So it wouldn't be something encompassed in the short-term rental update, but it would be a separate ordinance that would support the short-term rental update if we wanted to take this route. It would provide the ability for the third party to collect TOT directly when bookings are happening, and then that TOT would be then paid to from the third party to the city. So it would help with help with providing the city with accurate nightly rental activity. Potential benefits are improved compliance, enhanced program administration, revenue protection, so making sure that we are getting the TOT that is supposed to be coming to the city. So this would move away from the honor system potentially if we do want to keep going down this avenue. It would help with moving away from the honor system and getting actual numbers reported with TOT submittals. On June 10th, we did have an outreach meeting, as Director Mikhail did state before. Do you want me to go back?
No, I think this is just an important slide, so we'll put the information, let's go ahead and put the information up to help streamline the presentation so that the commission can see what the key takeaways were. So if you can summarize these, that'll be helpful. Yeah. I don't think we have to read everything, but we can summarize them.
Okay. So on June 10th, we did have an outreach meeting held via Zoom. Approximately 30 people were in attendance. That included residents, short-term rental owners, and interested public. The notice was sent out to permitted short-term rental holders, a 300-foot radius of those permitted short-term rentals, and then anyone on the wait list. And then it was also posted publicly on our social media websites. The key takeaways that staff took from this meeting are there were a lot of comments. Some people had similar opinions, some were opposing opinions. But the main takeaways were permit structure and availability. There was a variety of interest, whether it was to increase or to keep it the same. How would we do that? There was very good discussion about that, so I would highly recommend watching it once it's available to the public. The administration process, so we had some mixed reviews on the renewal timeline, so moving it from either biannual to annual. There was strong support for monitoring of illegal short-term rentals. And then there was significant concern over short-term rental clustering, and there was support for spacing standards, whether that be the 300-foot increase or greater. There was some good support for that. This definitely doesn't encompass all of the comments we received, but it is a very high-level overview of the meeting itself. And then the final one was program balance. So people were interested in seeing how they recognize the economic capabilities that we could see changing here. But there was a concern for the availability of maintaining current housing and keeping that neighborhood character of knowing your neighbor and things like that. So there was still concern, but it didn't seem like it was fully off the table as far as the whole meeting went. For this evening, for topics of discussion, we really want to focus on permit availability, so either maintaining the existing cap of 25 permits, the possibility of incrementally increasing the permit cap, or exploring housing stock-based cap option, so a percentage of the housing stock. Operational requirements we want to focus on are hearing about the review process of permits, the timeline for renewals. We're also hoping to get feedback on the primary residence exemption, reporting and verification requirements, and then the geographical buffer between short-term rentals. Possible policy considerations are to balance the program demand with keeping our neighborhoods the same and within the same nature and character that they've always been. Evaluate administrative efficiency and enforcement capabilities, and then consider consistency with long-term housing and tourism goals as well. Next steps. So tonight we're hoping for Planning Commission and community feedback. This is a reminder that there will be no decisions made tonight. We're really here to listen and to get as much feedback as we possibly can. And as was stated previously, the outreach meeting will be posted within the next 1 to 2 weeks on our website. I do have a notepad here, so for any interested parties wanting to be notified when that's posted, I can take your information and we can make sure that you're noticed of that. Next would be the refinement of the draft ordinance. So revised based on input received and how staff best sees fit to move forward with our ordinance and community as a whole. And then we may have additional public outreach if needed, if it's appropriate, if we're having questions. And then future public hearings would be that a more draft ordinance would come for a recommendation to City Council, if recommended by Planning Commission to go to City Council for adoption. Those would be the next 2 steps. Tentatively, we're looking at possibly bringing back to Planning Commission fall or winter 2026. And then City Council, depending on how Planning Commission would go, we're looking to hopefully bring by winter 2026, 2027. But the available staff are myself, Senior Planner O'Neill, and Director McKyle, and we're available for questions.
Thank you. And just real quick for the commission, I'm going to ask staff to go back to the slide that are the talking points to help guide the discussion for the commission, and that's behind you or over the large screen here. I do want to remind the Planning Commission and the public that staff has taken a very, very draft set of edits to the ordinance that are posted online, and the purpose of that is to elicit conversation and communication and ultimately deliberation down the line on what's best to do. So hopefully that's helpful. People look at ordinance amendments in different ways. Some people find that seeing the ordinance itself is more helpful with the edits. Others feel that watching a video or looking at a PowerPoint is more helpful. So there's different avenues, and so we've now moved towards providing those draft edits. There will be more edits that occur through the iteration of this process. Tonight was a little bit longer of a presentation, but I think the commission knows sort of where we're going with this, and we're hoping for a lot of feedback from both the public again and the commission on what to look at, what to research further, et cetera. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for preparing that and all the work that you did last week for the community outreach as well. So at this time, I want to ask my fellow commissioners if there are any clarifying questions. We'll come back to deliberation or discussion, but if you have any clarifying questions of staff, this is the time.
I just have one. When you presented the current map with the dots of everybody, is there any, I mean, because we're discussing about distance between them, do we know what the shortest distance is between the two rentals or currently? I mean, is there any pattern to that currently, or there isn't?
I think that right now there's not a pattern because there was never anything codified for a pattern or even written in a policy or program. That being said, we can certainly look at that and provide that information when we do come back so that it helps the commission, be more informed when you're making a recommendation to the city council.
I have to say that I was a little pleasantly surprised to see that the short-term rentals are fairly spread out, on both the west side and the east side of town and throughout the town. So I think that's a good thing.
And
Commissioner Covell, any clarifying questions?
If I may, I'm just going to add, those are exactly the types of questions we're looking at to see when you're looking through this process and what's going to come back, it's helpful for staff to understand, I want to know what the distances are for the 25 that are going to be existing, or 23 to 25. So thank you. That's very helpful for us to know what to research.
I do have a clarifying question on the presentation. I think I know the answer to it, but I just want to make sure. For where it says there's 62 on the wait list, and then there were 35 on priority. The priority was given to people who actually will also be living on the property. Like, is that what it is? The primary?
So priority is given to anyone who lives within city limits. If it's more of like a second home and you're not a full-time resident of the city of St. Helena, that's when you would be put on a secondary wait list.
I'll build on that by asking, how do you define a primary home? Like, is that self-reported? Is it based on voter registration? How do we know that someone's telling us when it's their primary residence that they're really there?
I think that that's a great question for us to follow up and ensure. I will say that staff here is new, and so these short-term rentals have been approved over the last decade, and so I don't want to speak for what has occurred in the past, but I think that question is something that we can try to look into, especially for the existing ones, to verify. And to staff's point, when they're walking through this process and they're proposing an annual renewal, part of that would be the basis of what we look at is, are you still a primary resident here or not? And that would and could that affect your renewal or not? And those are all things that I think the Planning Commission and the City Council are going to have to weigh and balance on what their priorities are there. But that's a great question. I think we need to look into it. I don't know that we have that answer right now. I'll look at staff and ask.
We do, when anyone's interested in joining the wait list, we do have them fill out kind of a pre-eligibility checklist. And in there, it is on our system reporting, but we do have a note on there that staff can request tax documents or things like that to verify the primary residence.
Great. Maybe we codify that.
But we don't necessarily practice that upon renewal. I don't think that we're following up on that.
No, that's not currently part of the renewal process.
So primary and owner occupied, I saw that on some of the stuff. Is that kind of the same thing?
Yeah, so I believe for at least taxes, to be your primary residence, you have to live there 50% or more. So that's why we do have the option to ask for tax documents to verify. Doesn't say that we can 100% guarantee that, but it's the best way we have at this time.
I have another question. Sorry, it's different than this one. as far as I think it was asked as well on the Zoom last week, was how much, is there any like document of what the revenue has been over the years of what TOT has been collected for this town through STRs?
So at this point in the process, we haven't pulled formal numbers yet. We have kind of started the conversations with finance to get that information, but we haven't gathered any formal numbers or data at this time. But we are doing the research, and by the time this comes back next time, we will have that information.
Yes,
I think that's really critical. I mean, I think everyone recognizes that this is a cost-benefit relationship. So what is the benefit to the community from the revenue? You need to know what that is, versus the impact on the community. So I think most people are looking for a balance, but you can't really determine what that is without understanding what the revenue benefit is to the community. So, great.
Yeah, I'll just add that, something that I'm helping staff know is we want to make sure that we're vetting the information too before we're bringing it publicly. So we could have some tentative information. I'm a true believer of not just throwing that out there and really making sure that we're comfortable behind the information to the best of our abilities. So like Natalie said, we are looking at this, we're actively looking at it, but I'm not comfortable sharing it yet until we've asked all the questions of finance, et cetera, to really all feel comfortable about presenting it publicly, if that makes sense. We're working on it.
I totally support that you are doing your due diligence.
Absolutely.
And that it's all fact-based and not speculative, and we can give the community numbers with confidence. Sure. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to open public comment. I'll just add that we did get 5 community members submitted letters. Perhaps some of them may also come up and speak. I want to thank those community members for being very thorough. They gave lots of examples and suggestions, which I'm sure have been, incorporated into the staff's consideration. So if anyone has public comment, please go up to the podium and state your full name. 2 from 1 person. Oh. Okay.
Do I have 4 minutes, or what is the issue?
Yes, you have 4 minutes.
Okay.
And I think you have a timer on there, and
Through the Vice Chair, if I may offer something so that everyone doesn't have to stand, I might just actually ask that a piece of paper, if you put your name on it, and we'll call you in order, then you don't have to stand there all night. It's up.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and you can walk up here and you can sign your name in.
Me too?
You don't have to, you're first,
Oh,
but, yeah, so if the 3 here then you don't have to stand there. If you can sign your name in and it helps us as well, keep track.
I also want to
I'm
add.
actually going to ask that you put your names on the list so that it helps our staff. Thank you.
I also want to add, and I'm sure most of you know, that we cannot engage with any comments or questions at this time, but we'll absolutely be taking lots of notes and taking that into consideration and discussing with staff.
All right. My name is Tom Belt, and I live on Hillview Place. I think before we go much more forward, you brought up one good question about how much revenue is coming in. I was going to ask that question too, because as you say, the cost benefit, there's a lot of negativity that can come with these STRs too. And if there's not enough income coming in to provide for it, to balance that out, I don't think it's worth it at all. And I'd also like to say that I would put a preference on approving permits for people who live in a house and offer a room in that house to have a short-term person come in for the weekend or something. Maybe there could be 3 stages of priority. The reason I say that is because for the enforcement, if the people who are living in the house are there to witness the activities going on after, say, 9, 10 o'clock, and they're going to be able to control that rather than have the police come in, or rather than have the residents send in a letter of complaint to the community development director. Okay, but first of all, when I listened to the Zoom meeting, I guess I need some clarification. I thought Ms. McHale said there were 4,000. The home stock was 4,000, and now I'm seeing it's 2,800. My question would be, does that include all of the second homes in St. Helena? I submitted a letter like so many other people did, and I don't have it in front of me, but I seem to think, or I remember that the percentage of second homes in this community is rather 45% to 50%. So if there are 2,800 home stock, that means that there's 1,400 short-term rentals already, or Picassos, or something to that effect. So if we were to use the 1% rule on 1,400, that would be 14 STRs. If we were to use 2%, that'd be 28. So I think that's some information that really needs to be determined before this goes on much further. And I also asked the question about ADUs. Are ADUs going to be allowed to become short-term rentals? Anyway, I'll go ahead and close, but I did submit a letter, and I would very much appreciate the commission reading all of the letters. I know you do, but taking those into consideration, because I'm of the opinion that short-term rental, I don't think they belong in residential neighborhoods. I think they're hotels, and I think that they just, unless they're very well controlled and I'm trying to put this into words to make sense. I would much rather have a full-time neighbor that I can talk to, rely on, have them watch my property, have them, when I moved here, my neighbors watched my children. When they, if there was a problem, they called us. You don't get that with a short-term person living there. They can watch your cars at night. They watch your neighborhood. There's a lot of benefits that a full-time resident provides for a neighborhood over someone who's there for just less than 30 days, sometimes just a weekend. So I'm going to conclude with that before the buzzer rings.
Thank you, Mr. Belt.
Thank you for and I also, real shortly, I would like to compliment the Community Development Director for offering the Zoom meeting and giving us an opportunity to talk about this. I think that was very important, very well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. My name is Shavana Kelly. I live at 963 McCorkle Avenue here in St. Helena. There are two short-term rentals right across the street from me, side by side. For those who asked, the closest, I believe that I'm probably in one of the highest density areas for short-term rentals. McCorkle Avenue, you guys keep me honest, but I believe it is zoned more of an R2 space. We do have an apartment complex. We have duplexes. So it is a higher occupancy area. I see you, Natalie, shaking your head there versus, a R1 area. We would like to have a short-term rental at some point, and so I am concerned about the 300-foot spacing requirement. If we did do this, it would be owner-occupied, so I do appreciate the comments about owner-occupied properties. If we were to do it, it would also be due to financial hardship. I unfortunately lost my job recently. I was in tech for a long time, and we all know what's happening with tech in the Bay Area. And so, due to that, we would look at, renting out a room actually to keep our home. So I'm transitioning from tech to now working at the Meadowood here in the community, and would like to make that investment here in the community. We like St. Helena. We moved here because we love wine. We've built a beautiful butterfly garden here in the community. My husband's retired, and he is the neighborhood watch. So we are wonderful, neighbors, and do take the pride of ownership. And if we were to do this, we would be looking at introducing wine to people who come here and really making that investment here in the community. And so I do think that we need to consider more nuances in the policy, such as owner occupancy. I do think that that needs to be considered more, as well as the housing density too of the area. I do think that that addresses a lot of the concerns. I was a part of the phone call that we had in the community outreach, and I do respect all of the neighbors who did express concern, over knowing their neighbors and having people there. I do think that considering both the owner occupancy as well as the density would help. The area I am in tends to be fairly transient, and so it does help actually to have owners like us who are full-time, who are living there, and then bringing people in only, on occasion. That concludes my comments. I do want to thank, the team here, staff, for such a thoughtful recommendation, for inviting the community to share feedback, and for listening to our opinions and taking them into consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly, for your comments.
Next, did you want to go last? Are you Mary Stevenson?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun, but I'm on a schedule here. I'm Mary Stevenson. I'm speaking as an individual tonight, not representing any group. I do have the revenue questions everybody else noted. I'd like to know what the total revenue is for the years that we've had this, what the net revenue is after you take out the cost for monitoring and maintaining the program, and I'd also like to know what the percentage of the total TOT the short-term rentals provides each year. I'm looking at this from a different perspective, and as you could probably guess from me, I'm wondering if the prospect of generating more revenue by increasing the number of SDR permits has been analyzed against the cost of replacing the single-family residents that will be taken out of circulation by doing this. According to Community Scale, and they use the ACS data, St. Helena has lost an average of 16 households every year since 2010. 16 households every year since 2010. Permits issued since 2020 represent 1% of the current housing. So we're losing families, we're not building housing. The mean cost of a house today is $1.7 million. And that would take an income of $373,000 to finance that. So I think it's safe to say that the main reason we're losing our middle class is because we aren't providing them housing. My data shows that there's currently 1,873 single-family homes in St. Helena. And I have to go back and check that because I just saw the data in the report. But I think the difference is probably in rentals and in developments, townhouses, et cetera, who would all have HOAs who would not allow short-term rentals. Of the 873, 65% are owner-occupied, 16% are rented, and the rest, 336, are vacant. And I'm assuming that the 25 STRs are not in those vacant rentals if they are owner-occupied or a part of the town. So which rented houses or which middle-class houses are we going to take out of full-time residents to put more short-term rentals in? Which families are we going to take out of the community so we can do this? Also consider that the Hunter Project, the Spring Grove Project, and the Spring Vineyard Project are going to use 24 acres of land within our city limits, and they're going to provide 31 affordable homes among all three of those projects. All the rest are going to be for sale above 1.5 million, most of them above 2 million. And the new rentals, I hear, don't have this as a fact, but I hear they're going to rent for $4,000 to $5,000 per unit. So I'm asking you to weigh the increase of revenue from TOT for 25 new or 5 a year against replacing the living spaces for the working people in St. Helena. And the third thing is, why is the revenue for the existing short-term rentals not going to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? Because what we're doing is removing full-time residential houses and putting them into a fund so we can get a little more TOT, and then we're taking that money and put it in the general fund. And I don't think that's right. The Affordable Housing Fund is underfunded because for a lot of reasons. And I think it's time to start thinking about this from the fact of what are we doing to our community, and why aren't we proactively developing housing for our community instead of taking housing out of our community? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson.
Hello, Planning Commission. Jim Sweeney, 1407 Kearney. We're a short-term rental permit holder. The first thing I'd like to say to Ms. Kelly is I think that, one, as we have this discussion, that we shouldn't see that this is a displacement of residents, but it also could be a bridge of becoming a resident in this community. Even if this home were open for $1.7 million, that's a big number. And so we should take in mind, those that are using the short-term rental permit as a bridge to staying in town. And the second one is in looking at fact-based decision-making, I think it would be important also to try to take the list of the permit holders and try to ask how many days have they rented this permit per year, because we turn them in monthly. And in the initial discussion about short-term rental permits some time ago, there was a very brief moment where we talked about two-tier permits. And so there's a couple families on the list that rent their home 10 days a year when they go to Hawaii. And that's all they use it for. So they're on their block 50 weeks a year. And so I would recommend that once you kind of accumulate the data for the days rented, those numbers will tell us something. Is there a two-tier? Is there a cap on rental dates? Is there not a cap? There's still a longer conversation. I know the idea of the short-term rentals, kind of is a frightening conversation for many communities. But I think the days count will kind of help gel the conversation as well. And then the other one is, at least just relative to the other recommendations, as short-term rental holders, I love the idea of going to the platforms. It's going to do two things. It's going to give you guys transparency. It is a little bit complex to go claw back the TOT from the guests. We've never had a problem. But the key is you really have to have two conversations. You can rent it, and then I need to send you an invoice for the TOT, and then I need to submit it. That's all taken out, I think, by being on the platforms. And then the annual renewal date, we're big fans of that. So you don't have to kind of keep an eye out for it. So I think the short-term rental permit can be a bridge to staying in the community as opposed to blocking somebody out. I think that once you have the days, there may be a two-tier solution here. And then the other one is we support the rental platform and the renewal dates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
Hi. Thank you for having me tonight and opening this forum. It's wonderful. My name's Marie Phillips. I actually represent Napa Valley Vacation Rental Coalition. We're an organization under the California Short-Term Rental Organization as well, which is a 501(c) organization that advocates for short-term rentals. So I am here with all those words to say I am in pro short-term rental for the community. I am so happy to hear all the changes that you mentioned today. I think they align perfectly with what's going on with the communities that are in and surrounding our area. I'm currently a vacation rental property manager for a property in Sonoma County as well as San Mateo County as well. And I represent an owner that is 89 years old and her husband is 95 years old and they suffer from dementia. Their children have let their home stay vacant, their vacation rental stay vacant for the last 3 years, and hired me to bring that property alive on Airbnb. And from that, it's paid for their in-home care, it's paid for their property taxes, and it's helped them keep their family home for the last 25 years that they owned it. I can only imagine how many families here in Napa Valley also could benefit from that kind of revenue from an Airbnb or a short-term rental. In alignment with all the things you mentioned, I do work with Sonoma County on the TOT tax, where Airbnb pulls that tax for them and from Airbnb and VRBO. Sorry, the city pulls that tax from Airbnb and from VRBO, and it works fantastic. So for you guys to pull that in and not have to rely on hosts to go and report it is amazing. It's the way to go. It streamlines it. It makes it extremely more efficient. I also think an annual renewal process will help you guys bring clarity to where those homes are, who's actually renting them. And I worked with Airbnb recently to Ms. Kelly's response earlier about the housing stock. The actual housing stock is correct of what you guys mentioned. I'm not sure if it brings in those apartment buildings or townhomes, but bringing it to a 1 to 2% cap in the market is actually aligns perfectly with all the other surrounding counties around you. I just saw this flip over in South Lake Tahoe, where I actually helped manage a property there too, and it brought the housing stock there. They also put a 300-foot boundary in between homes, and I thought that was lovely. To one of the ladies who spoke secondly, I do think like Sonoma County, where they implemented all their rules and regulations, they didn't take away the short-term rental permit from people who've been great actors, good actors, and haven't caused problems. They grandfathered those people in. And with that renewal process of year over year, those permits have been sold, and houses have been sold, so new permits can come in, or that house went to another thing. To what Ms. Kelly said earlier about the housing stock taking away homes and putting more things, there's actually 33 properties to every one short-term rental that sits vacant as a vacation rental here, as a vacant home here. So there are more vacant homes here than there are short-term rentals, of course. There's less than 1% currently on the market, so bringing that and increasing it to 1 to 2% absolutely makes sense. Those vacation homes, with what Mr. Sweeney said, that family that uses it for 10 days a year to go to Hawaii and it pays for their stuff. I actually got numbers from Airbnb directly today, and they confirmed that it's actually 0.021% are actual vacation homes that are 90 days or more on the Airbnb platform. So you have only 6 homes that are used as a vacation home on Airbnb more than 90 days a year. So your stock of short-term rentals are actually way lower than the 25 that are actually permitted, because we don't see them using it on Airbnb as an actual vacation rental all day, every day. Gosh, I have 30 seconds left. I have so much to say. Your framework, well, I'll just wrap it up with that as my last thoughts, because I think the things you're recommending are wonderful. I really appreciate you guys opening this up for public comment. And I really would love to help to show you guys what I see from other counties that I work in and what their processes are and how they've implemented it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips.
Can I just make a clarification? I think everybody's referring to Miss Kelly when was Miss Stevenson. I want to make sure. Okay, Miss Kelly, it wasn't you who said that.
Good evening. My name is John Sales. I live at 1451 Oak Avenue. And this has been very enlightening. I think we're missing something as a community here. I can empathize with what Mr. Sweeney has said. As a homeowner, that would be a nice thing to do. It helps you out, financially. But getting to the real nut of the matter is that we're actually allowing people to take housing out of the housing market and out of the being available for people to actually live in. I don't think that we as a town should be subsidizing or allowing the subsidy of second homes by letting them be rentals. We got 25, I'm okay with that at this point, but going forward to build on that, you're actually subsidizing those people that want to own a second home in St. Helena. And I don't think we should be doing that. We need people living in those homes that live in St. Helena. We need families to live in St. Helena. What we're doing is artificially pushing up the value of those places by making them fundable. And if you look at our overall community, the number of children in the schools are going down. The number of full-time residents is going down. And what we're doing here is we're perpetuating that. I don't know what the answer is, but adding more vacation rentals or short-term rentals is not the right way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sales. Do we have any other public comment?
I believe that we might have skipped Mr. Jim Sweeney.
No?
Okay, you were further down on the list then. Okay, so the next would be Tamara Sorensen.
Oh, I wasn't asleep at the wheel. Okay. Excuse me while I get my notes together, if you don't mind. Okay. Yes, my name's Tamara Sorensen. Thank you, Planning Commission, and thank you for allowing all of the comments and all of the forums to allow us to do so. So I will start first with, I think that we all know that our city does need reliable, reoccurring revenue to balance our budgets and to fund some vital initiatives, including the basics that this city needs to be providing for its residents, such as clean water, roads that are not broken up, and we can go on, but we'll just stop with that. And that does also include affordable housing goals. But I think we also know that expanding our short-term rental market has been historically a non-starter because of the strain it puts on the code enforcement, the staff, and the disruption it could cause in quiet neighborhoods. But what we don't have to choose between fiscal health and neighborhood peace. Today, I am proposing a self-governance to the STR framework that maximizes city revenues, slashes municipal personal expenditures, and puts 100% of the enforcement burden on the property owners. If we expand our current permit cap of 25 units to 50, and I don't mean over a 4 or 5 year period, I mean something significant and meaningful that is going to show up as revenue, under this strict self-governing model, we could stand to bring in, and that will be up to you because I don't know what we're bringing in currently, but I would very much like to know that number as well as a number of other folks in the audience here. But we could actually double the annual gross TOT revenue. Furthermore, the initial application packages would inject up to, and let's find out what that would be, but it would be making this budget positive from day one. And this could be achieved without hiring new code enforcement officers or new administrative folks by the 3 strikes and you're out policy, which, by the way, I used to be worked for a sporting events company. I traveled all over the United States with putting on and producing PGA golf tournaments. And we did this very system at Augusta National for the Masters golf tournament, and it worked impeccably. And the reason it worked impeccably is because there was accountability. So under the 3 strikes you're out policy, homeowners must monitor their own property using mandatory smart noise sensors. That would be one thing that we could have to make them provide. They must all provide notice to their neighbors within 300, 500, whatever the benchmark is, with their direct 24/7 phone number. That way, if a disruption occurs, the homeowner homeowner that is experiencing the disruption could contact the manager, and it would have to be within a certain amount of time to resolve it. And that would certainly be something that could be resolved prior to any city services having to be brought into the picture. If the host fails and a neighbor has to issue a formal complaint, the penalties are swift. One strike is an official warning. A second one is a rewriting of the mandatory operational rules. And the third strike, you're out. You get a $1,500 city penalty to cover the administrative costs, and then you automatically pull and revoke the permit. That's how Augusta National does it. That's how they keep that course decorum strict, but still allows that revenue to be coming in. This policy creates a self-filtering ecosystem. Bad operators are aggressively weeded out and penalized at their own expense, while responsible homeowners bring in the vital dollars that are not only our sister city needs, but this fine young woman said that her family needs it. And that's a second subject that I would like to address. But I can submit a detailed summary of this, if that would be helpful. But I also wanted to make the point that Mr. Sweeney made in the 2 or 3 tier system. I think that's brilliant. The cumulative days rented. If somebody only needs 2 weeks a year, it's a less permit as far as a cost to the homeowner. If they need 2 months, there's one other one. If they need 6 months, there's another. Another tier that could be had is you, as a city, we only allow so many for summer rentals and so many for winter rentals. So you make it a seasonality. So you're then, what's the word I'm looking for? You're stretching the permitting of, say, 50 permits a year to maybe 25 a season. But that way we can have a little bit more say as to how much would be coming into the city, as far as the, have some kind of an idea also of the revenue that would be coming. I do disagree with the kind gentleman and the lady over here saying that it displaces homeowners. It does not displace homeowners, and it does not displace renters, and it does not displace affordable housing. What it does, it allows the freedom of a homeowner to do with their hard-earned dollars, their mortgage. They make the mortgage payments, they make the insurance payments. And if a city is going to say that because I was fortunate enough to work hard enough to have a second residence, that I can't have that residence, that's not America. And if they say I can't use my residence to feed my family or someone else that in my family that I need to put, and I had to, both of my mother-in-law and my mother, I had to mortgage my house to do. Nobody could tell me I couldn't because I made the payments. So I thank you for listening. And if anyone's interested, I'm happy to put along. I would very much like to see the 2-3 tier system as Mr. Sweeney recommended. And also I'm happy to write a letter just defining a little bit more about how to implement a less bureaucratic method that's just going to cost the city more money and cause more entanglements than it will solve the problems. Because we can do this.
Thank you, Ms. Sorensen. Do we have any other public comment? Seeing none, we will close.
I do have Suzanne Tate and Elaine Demand left on the list. So Suzanne, if you would like to come up, thank you.
And just through Vice Chair, my laptop battery has died. So if anybody saw me typing and now it stopped, it's only for that reason. Jackie's taking notes. All right.
Do you want my charger?
I'll be quick, and I just have a few points and a couple of bits of confirmation on what a few other people said. One is, I'm Suzanne Tate. I am a short-term rental permit holder. We're at 1764 Spring Street. I have my lovely family here and our 6-year-old, so we're a family, and we are growing our family here in St. Helena. I would also like to jump on the data bandwagon here. I've been online and looked for not only data this year, but years past, and it is so hard to form a decision on what we should be doing without that hard data. And if we don't have it, it's really hard to really make any decisions going forward. So if we could have that, not just for this year, but for all of the years that we've had this program, it would be really wonderful to help us form those opinions and the program moving forward. The other thing that I would like to dispel, and one thing that's been a common refrain that I've heard not only today, but also in the Zoom meetings of past, and also in the years that this program has been coming up before this is the misconception that the STR program dispels long-term residents. And I'm here to tell you that as a family, that is not true. Maybe with some households. However, what this does is it bolsters households here in St. Helena, and it's true for ours. It's allowed us to rent the lower unit in our home. We are owner occupied. It's allowed us to generate income. That's allowed us to make improvements to our own household, to our property, to do things for our family, and as I mentioned, to grow our family here in St. Helena. The other things I'm fully supportive of that have come up today are the annual renewal date, to make that an ongoing thing at one time of the year so that we don't have these odd dates that stick out and someone has to reach out to you. This is coming up every 2 years would be wonderful. The other thing is to lean into the technology. We also have a short-term rental that we utilize with our second home in Tahoe, and it is all online, and we report and we pay and we're reminded of things, and it makes everything so easy. Also, they collect the TOT, so anything that we could do to fully automate that, I am fully on board. So I know that's come up, fully supportive of that. The other thing moving forward is I hear that we want to increase the number of permits. The one thing that I would like to look at, and I hear this tiering system, is that we look at a diversity of housing stock so that that next 25 permits is not all 4 or 5 bedroom houses and all party houses. So how do we do that? Is there a tiering system that we look at that some are, single, room dwellings and some are probably larger dwellings, and so we don't have this outsized system or outsized the next 25 permits are all party homes here in St. Helena. So if there's something, and I don't have an a la minute response to how we would do that, but if there's some way that we could look at this to create some sort of diversity with what that next 25 does look like if we were to move forward in that direction, if that's the way that we go forward. And the next thing that I really do appreciate with how we move things forward is that wait list. I think it is integral to how we implement our system. I think that the fact that you have to be on a list and you have to wait means that people don't come in, buy a house, assuming that they're automatically going to be getting a permit. You've seen this happen in other communities. It happened down in Carmel where people buy a home and automatically get a permit. I think having to be on a wait list for a number of years guarantees that people aren't buying a home to automatically get a permit. So I think that's one thing that we should maintain if we are going to be keeping this, so that there is a wait between people buying and turning it into a short-term rental. So with that, I'll close. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Tate.
May I request a 5-minute bathroom break, because I drove a lot to get here and I don't want to miss any of the comments.
Yes, we'll break. We'll take a short break. Okay, let's resume the meeting. We are still in public comment.
Hi there, I'm Elaine DeMann. Thank you, staff, commissioners, for this opportunity to comment on this important topic. I want to start by saying that I'm not opposed to short-term rentals, nor am I necessarily opposed to increasing the number of permits. However, I do believe we should proceed carefully and make sure we fully understand the impacts and unintended consequences before making such a significant change. The proposal to increase the permit cap from 25 to 50 permits is perhaps the most significant change under consideration. While there may be room for additional permits, I'm not yet convinced that we have enough information or enough enforcement capability to justify doubling the program at this time. So rather than jumping from 25 to 50, I would encourage the city to consider a more incremental approach, perhaps authorize a small number of additional permits initially, and then evaluate how the revised ordinance is working after a year or two before deciding whether further expansion is warranted. My second concern is enforcement. I support the proposed move from 2-year permits to annual renewals and the improvements in reporting and accountability. However, those improvements only matter if the rules are actually enforced. Effective enforcement protects neighborhoods, creates fairness, and helps ensure that responsible permit holders are not placed at a disadvantage compared to those who choose not to comply with the rules. I also do not believe that serious or repeated violations should necessarily have to wait until the next renewal cycle to be addressed. The city should consider whether there should be a mechanism for suspension or revocation when there is a documented pattern of verified violations. My third concern is neighborhood concentration. I think the proposed 300-foot spacing requirement is a good start, but I'm not convinced that 300 feet or even 500 feet fully addresses cumulative neighborhood impacts. The issue is not simply whether two STRs are located next door to one another. The issue is whether certain neighborhoods or streets end up carrying a disproportionate share of the impacts while other neighborhoods experience none. If the entire community is expected to share in the benefits associated with STRs, including TOT revenue, it seems reasonable to discuss whether the impacts should also be distributed more equitably. I would also encourage the Commission to think about one possible unintended consequence of the 300-foot rule. A permit holder could potentially retain a permit indefinitely, effectively preventing other qualified property owners within that area from ever participating in the program. I understand the rationale for the spacing requirement, but I hope the city will consider whether there is a way to preserve neighborhood protections while also ensuring that access to the program remains fair over time. And I heard you loud and clear, and I want to add that I fully support owner-occupied properties, and I'm sorry, I hand wrote this note. I can hardly read my writing. And I'd like to give them the opportunity to welcome visitors to their home and introducing them to our community. And I'd like to think that that's who we are. So that was, as I recall, the original intent of Airbnb, and I think it's a shame that it has morphed into a profit center. Finally, I would encourage the city to take a closer look at housing availability before relying too heavily on total housing unit counts as a basis for expansion. What matters is not simply how many housing units exist, but how many are actually available to full-time residents and workforce households. And I would like to close with one broader thought. While St. Helena is undoubtedly a world-class visitor destination, it is also much more than that. It remains a residential community with deep agricultural roots, long-standing neighborhoods, and a unique small-town character that residents value greatly. Whatever decisions are made regarding short-term rentals, I hope the city does not lose sight of the fact that St. Helena is first and foremost a place where people live, work, raise families, and build community. Preserving that balance is an important part of what makes St. Helena such a desirable place to visit in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeMann. Do we have any other public commenters? Seeing none, I will close public comment and turn it back to the commissioners for comments, questions, deliberation. This is an opportunity for us. I think let's focus certainly on the topics for discussion that staff has asked us to give them feedback on, but feel free if you have other comments as well outside of that scope.
And just a fair reminder, we're not making any decisions tonight. This is just an avenue for receiving information for consideration in the future.
Well, I'd like to go first, if I can. I did read all the comments, and there's a mixture of things that I liked that could be combined. Being a resident in Charter Oak and having grown and played football there as a kid and all that, out of a class of 100, maybe 3 of us still live in St. Helena, and it's sad how so many people move away from the town they grew up in, and we're very fortunate those that stay here. But one thing that is different for me is that I got notice of that because I'm 300 from that one, and I got it the day after it already had passed. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I mean, I didn't pick it up one night out of my thing, and then it had already passed. When I looked at it, I go, oh my God, here's this, and there's a second one that came in. So something is a little bit off on when we get notice. We don't get like 3 or 4 days. I didn't even get, and I do travel a lot, And yeah, maybe my daughter or my wife could have picked up the mail, but I always grab that or take the recycle out. It seems like this is my thing. So that's concerning that maybe some residents didn't get some input into it, because I know I'm one of them. But what concerns me is that we have a program and it has to be tightened up, I think, before we could really expand it, in my opinion, to where we get some more hard facts. And the owner occupied, to me, seems sensible in the sense that they'll keep track of their residents, and if they cause any ruckus, it could be calmed and make the neighborhood better. And the street that I've lived in most of my life, with the exception of moving out and going to college and coming back a couple of years, it's very different. I don't have neighbors on the other side that occupy their place. They're great neighbors and very fancy houses, and it gets groomed, but I only see them twice a year, right? And I don't go borrow sugar or anything like it used to be. Like we used to like exchange figs and fruit and all that. All the farmers are gone, right? So the reality is that there is a blend of where we need to have neighbors, we need to have residents, and before we expand, we got to get hard numbers. And maybe these distances can be managed, the annual reporting. I don't agree with some of the things of easier reporting, but maybe going annual reporting, but where it's taken out of the Planning Commission, because we all live in our community and get feedback. Even though it's a little harder, more tedious, I know that when I'm gone, some other resident will come and apply, and it will be different here. But it's important that permits maybe are reviewed and distributed according to some rules that we set. Then from there, I think the expansion could be done, but I think it's a mixed match of all the comments that you've had. And I'm going to look at it very carefully before I make my recommendation. I'm only one out of several commissioners, but I hear both sides of it, and I think it could be very much built upon once we slowly build it up and get the proper numbers. So we do build this community. And really, we could look at our neighbors, but Santa Helena is very unique. You know, maybe we've been strict, and that was a good thing with keeping the small numbers, but there's some logic to that. And what I'm looking at with the dots and spacing and maybe the complaints, all that, I'm going to take it all, soak it in, and soak in all your comments, because it's important that we expand respectively and honor those great homeowners that are using it the right way. But we can't afford to also just have, like they say, like party houses or what have you, which I don't think this area is getting to much. But we'd like to look at all those numbers and listen to everybody in the community. And I thank you. I'm really interested in seeing the video, but I think with the comments, I kind of got a sum of all of it, right? But I would have been there, to be honest. I just missed it by a day, and I just wanted to bring that fact that I got the 2 yellow notices, but darn it, it was yesterday ago. So anyways, that's it, Michael.
If I may, I'm just going to address, I'm not a fan, so Lisa McKyle, Director of Community Development, I'm not a fan of quote-unquote snail mail for that exact reason. Something that we're looking at is utilizing some of the tools that we have available here in the city and that a lot of other jurisdictions utilize, where electronically you can sign up for, it's called a listserv or Notify Me, and you can sign up, and then we can pump out those informational items so that you get the notice immediately in your email or your text message. And so we're going to move towards that, particularly for this item and a couple of our other larger development projects. I'm in those conversations now, so hopefully that resolves some of the notification issues. I'm hearing, I don't know if this is true or not, the mail goes to Oakland for a distribution center and then comes back. You know, we're not sending notices 30 days in advance. So I'm hopeful that this technology fix will be well received. So thank you for that feedback. I certainly don't like hearing that a commissioner didn't get that either. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Lopez. Commissioner Cavell?
Yeah. Thank you. Wow. We got a lot of feedback, and I want to thank everybody for it. I did attend the Zoom as well. I missed just a little bit because my phone disconnected. But I think what I'm hearing from everyone about this is trying to understand it better with data and facts that could then help us make some smart, informed decisions, and make sure that the community, and boosting the community and not losing the community is the most important part of it. I think some of the things that I've been hearing, there are contrasting comments, but, I can understand with losing a job and then needing to find another alternate income or something to help. And then the other lady who also said, there's older people who she's working to rent out their house. So there's alternate incomes that some people use this for. It's not just all party houses. I think that might be one of the points that we need to kind of talk about. I've used Vrbo, and I like the platform idea because there is more transparency in the reporting. What it sounded like from the presentation was that there's no honor system. It is just through the app, and it's just more easy. I also I think nobody wants to rent their house and have their house destroyed. I don't think anybody wants to rent it to a party group. At least from my understanding, if I were to rent my house, I wouldn't want a party group just because you can kind of imagine the mess that they might leave, and nobody wants to do that. So I think also with these apps, it's kind of like they have ratings, right? You can rate the person staying, and there's this these people have been really good guests, and you kind of have that understanding that they're not troublemakers in renting your home. At least that's my understanding. I've never had a Vrbo, but I've participated in it, and it's very clear. They send you these are the rules, these are the guidelines, and the noise, and I think what's interesting is the 3 strikes rule, or the enforcement then really puts it on the owner to make sure that the people who stay, they don't mess up their short-term rental. That would be going through all these hoops to get the short-term rental, and then having somebody who's just causing a nuisance, and nobody wants that. I don't think so. I think enforcing increasing the enforcing, I got to go to the list. Let me just pull up the not on the slide. Oh yeah, but my neck is okay, sorry. So it sounds like, at least from what I can tell, people are not having issues with the 2 years. It seems like annual renewal seems to make sense. That seems. And I think from the Zoom meeting, it wasn't going to cost more. That was one of the questions. It was kind of like splitting that fee. And then I think compliance monitoring, am I on the right one? Gosh, discussion, here we go. Okay, the cap. I think the discussion about the cap really is important to understand the housing units a little bit more, and ensuring we understand the right balance for the community. I think the comment about reducing long-term housing, it was interesting to hear. I think it was Suzanne Tate who said by having a wait list, nobody can just buy a house and then turn it into short-term rental, which was pretty important. I think that you're living here, you're buying a house, and then there's this whole wait list, and so some of that will guide the fact that this town doesn't turn into a short-term rental crazy filled place with a lot of tourists and not residents. I mean, I think what I'm hearing from a lot of people is that having residents here, or having a balance, being able to have alternate incomes so that families can stay, I mean, and or provide a side means of income, or for, you know, balancing repairing your home, or like if you're retired and you need some money, it's just a nice way to do this. Now, I would also say you could long-term rent your ADU, you could long-term rent, I'm just saying this, I don't, like you could also have alternate income and rent it for a longer time. I think the reason why people don't do that is because you make more money, I think, per night. I don't know. Is that the case? Like short-term rentals, you charge for a shorter period of time and it's higher rates. It is more like a hotel than it is a like rent, like, your rent, right?
I can just speak from my experience in another community, and I think the issue when you're deciding whether to do short-term rentals, one of the many issues, versus long-term, is when you have a long-term renter, asking a long-term renter to leave is much more complicated.
Yes.
So if you want to move back into the house, or
Sure.
if there are issues along the way, there are a host of other problems that go along
Yes.
with that you have to consider. So that would be my feedback to you.
Thank you. I mean, I guess the thing is also, I have a question in the sense that there was 60 days minimum a year. Is there a maximum time typical in a year? Like, would you say, is there like you can't go over 300 or something?
We don't currently have a maximum that's codified, but when we come back with that data, we can certainly present, what is the maximum number of days that we're seeing, as well as an average and the fewest number that we see.
Yeah.
I think also we're looking at other jurisdictions, and so do other jurisdictions look at a maximum number, or is it typically just a minimum? And we can look into that to supplement that question.
I mean, I think in that sense too, as the 300 rule, I get the fact that I think somebody else wrote in on that as well, is that if they wanted to get a short-term rental, they wouldn't be able to, because somebody could just constantly renew and they would not be able to get it. And that's just by unfortunate happenstance, because somebody got to it first. So it would be interesting to figure out, maybe is there a better way to kind of share it a little bit? I don't know. If you plan on saying, hey, I really just want to meet the 60, and I plan to do it in these months, I mean, I understand Tamara's was a little bit, and somebody was talking about tiers. Maybe there's a way to be a little more flexible and share that, so that other people, and I think Elaine DeMann talked about equity, just finding a way to spread the love in that sense. I think all of the comments were really important. I ultimately, what really, I really want to understand the metrics, the data for displacement versus what is that realistically, because from a couple of people who have spoken tonight, is that this helps them stay here in the community, and like they can afford. I mean, it's unaffordable to live here. Mortgages, utilities, PG&E, all that stuff adds up. Cost of living cost of groceries, restaurants. I mean, you want to support local, but it is very expensive to live and dine here and do all of that, right? And you want to do it because you love this town. So then how can we make sure that some people, I don't think everybody is like raking in extra dough. Some people rely on side income, or, maybe their job doesn't have a high salary. Maybe they need alternate income. and that helps them balance out the rising water fees. So I would just say the metrics and the data would be really interesting to me to understand how we can find the right balance. I like the incremental increase. I like the suggestion of like having a diversity of sizes. I don't know if that, can be done or not, but I mean, I don't want to be overly restrictive as well. I think the idea of prioritizing owner occupied is nice. If that is objective, I don't know if that's objective or not. And I think the ordinance I think it would be interesting to analyze the data so that the decisions can really benefit the community as a whole and keep people living here and see it as an opportunity for TOT and for people to make enough to stay here. And I think I might have had one question. I already did it. The max day.
Thank you, Commissioner Covell. Lots of good input from both of you. Appreciated. So I will kind of weigh in. I think what you've heard is that we need some more data, but I'm optimistic because I think we do have some in our ordinance already, some protections and things that have, to the best of my knowledge, not created disturbances or issues. One of the things I'd like to see is a PD or a police department report on anything that has been called in on a short-term rental and what the nature of that was. Was it just noise? Was it, something bigger? So that we understand the dynamics and the impact on our community. Certainly, the revenue, the number of days that, that each unit has been renting per year is really helpful information. However, I do have some general feedback, of course, pending more data. And I'll address some of your topics for discussion because I know that's something, you're focused on, and I might have other comments as well. But I'll start with these. So I'm open to growing our number of short-term rentals. Clearly, based on our waiting list, there's demand. I'm encouraged that based on the map that you've shown us of current short-term rentals, there is mostly dispersion across the city, maybe with the exception of McCorkle. But so I am open to that, and I'm also open to it being staggered. I'd be open to more than 5 per year. Accelerating that again, depending on the data. I like that we have a 60-day minimum. It means that we're not giving permits to people that really don't generate any revenue for our community. And it just suits their, I'm not sure if we have someone. It was suggested that maybe we have short-term rental people or permits that are given to people who are just renting the 10 days they go to Hawaii. I don't know, but that's obviously a breach, and therefore that permit could be revoked. So I as long as we have, I think, those guardrails, which I think we already have some, and maybe there are others that we can add to our ordinance. 60 days feels kind of like the right minimum to me, but open, for discussion. I think exploring tying the short-term rentals to our housing stock is complicated because I don't know that that we have good data on that. and the expense, the time, and the cost of trying to get really accurate data, or data that's not, it's the best data we get, which is then disputable. So for that reason, I'm not sure that's the best way to do it. Shifting to administrative permit review and approval, I'm really open to, although I would love the Planning Commission to be notified each time there's a new permit. I think it's important for us to understand what's happening in our community, even if we're not necessarily voting on it. But I do have a question about an appeal. Would the appeal, let's say an applicant, for you decided for some reason, staff decided that you were not going to give a permit to that applicant, and they decided to appeal. Would that appeal come to the Planning Commission, or would it come to the City Council?
Sure. So Lisa Mikhail, Director of Community Development. One of the areas that we're looking at in moving towards the administrative process is what would an appeal process be? Would there still be one? It would go, if it's maintained, to the Planning Commission, most
Okay.
likely. And maybe it goes to the director first and then the Planning Commission. We're sensitive to cost. So what we're seeing and believing, which it's an honesty check when it comes to staff, the level of work and the cost that's going into a short-term rental permit, it feels a bit unnecessary for the level that it's coming to. So it's a fairly objective process, but it's going to a higher level. And so that requires this additional processing that we're going through. And perhaps that's only necessary when there's an appeal. And so that's partly what we're looking at, is what the balancing of what's really necessary in your initial review process for a short-term rental versus perhaps the cost comes with an appeal.
And I'm all in favor of efficiency, so I'm definitely open to administrative approvals. I think there's kind of universal agreement. I don't think there's been any objection to the annual renewal. It's more efficient for staff and probably the permit owners. I'm assuming that if someone applied mid-year, their fees would be prorated, because then they'd be renewed at full fee maybe in 6 months or so. So I would hope that would be the case. I think that's only fair to the applicant. Let's see, 60 days we talked about. In terms of reporting and monitoring, I'm all into leaning into the technology, and anyone who's willing to share, obviously you're going to look into what some other communities are doing. And as much as we could take advantage of automation and technology, I'm very in favor of. The 300-foot spacing, I'm aware of communities that do that pretty well. And I like that idea a lot. With the possible exception, and maybe this is that tiered consideration, is for owner occupancy. And maybe that's waived for owner occupancy. So I'd be open to looking at that as well. Because I do think there's a great benefit to owner occupancy, and I wouldn't want to penalize anyone. And they're there. So the whole idea that you're you don't have neighbors that you can borrow a cup of sugar from is kind of irrelevant in that case.
Waiving, sorry, I couldn't.
Oh, so the idea, I like the idea of the 300-foot geographical separation with the possible exception of an owner-occupied unit. In other words, an owner-occupied unit may be within the 300 feet, and that would be okay. Okay? Just an idea. Let's see what else you wanted input on. Okay, let's look if there's anything else I have in my notes. No problem. I'll get back to you. Having a local contact on file, I think, is critical. Do we currently have, it's unclear in all the documentation if we have any fines in our ordinance. So I know we give warnings and we can revoke a permit, but are there fines built into that as well?
I'll say that the existing ordinance has a very extensive enforcement section and fines. That being said, our typical municipal code also has that. And so we may be referencing a possibility for enforcement through our municipal code without it being embedded in the short-term rental and the zoning ordinance. That would be, so we're looking at that. I think what I'm hearing, though, is potentially coming back with fines, and I think we heard some of that from some of the the residents and some of the speakers. What would that look like? And 3 strikes, you're out, et cetera. And so we're going to be looking at that.
Okay, I'm in favor of fines. Of incorporating them and putting it in the ordinance so that people understand it up front. Hopefully it's a deterrent. You know, the more we can deter bad behavior. So this might be getting a little down in the weeds, but it would be nice, you know, as I've gone through a lot of our code the past year and a half now, in many cases, there are areas where there can be some discretion, and then other areas that are really rigid. So I want to, just pose this example. I mean, what if there's an applicant who's 295 feet away from the next short-term rental? Like how, you know, could there be some discretion if there, for example, and there were no protests from the neighbors? So again, I like leeway as much as flexibility as much as possible. And then it would be up to the department's discretion on whether that applicant is adding a benefit to the neighborhood, to the community, who that applicant is. Anyway, so because if you don't incorporate opportunities for either, exceptions, then there just clearly are none. I mean, you can't go back and write some new code just to incorporate that. Let's see what else I have. I think I did look at how many houses away 300 feet are from my house. It's about 5. I'm like, how? I'm not good with I don't know distance, 300 feet. I used to do the 100-yard dash, but that was a long time ago. It didn't say in the red line, and of course, this is just a draft, but I think it would be important to add how long staff takes to get back to an applicant once that application is submitted, especially if you're looking at an annual review process. I think that would be really helpful. So to get back to an applicant with either a decision or whether that application is incomplete.
If I may,
Sure.
That is something that we're looking at, and there may be certain portions of this program, what I'll call short-term rental program, that's codified, and then we may have an actual program and guideline. And so that within that, it might show those timelines, and there's benefit in that in the fact that there's an easier and more fluid ability to change when necessary the program or the guidelines, as opposed to something that's codified. But we are absolutely looking at that, and I wanted to let the commission know it's probably not going to just be an ordinance code, but it'll probably also be a program and guideline. That's helpful for especially people who are not as familiar with looking at ordinances and reading through them. And so that's something we're looking at, though.
Great. I really do like the idea of keeping the waiting period after someone buys a house. I think that's a protection against some of the comments that people are going to just buy a house here for a short-term rental income, just another way of generating income. I think that does discourage that, so I like keeping that in there. I would like to see, verification on how we verify primary residence, and that should be part of the annual renewal. Okay. I think that's most of mine, but before Commissioner Lopez, Commissioner Covell did mention to me that she had a couple comments, then we'll get over to you.
Did you want to address them?
You know what I was going to comment about, according to what data you can actually compile and what's missing, that's kind of what I'm going to base my decision on, what we need to add on those permits, because that's going to be important. Whatever you couldn't come up with, I go, oh, well, we got to add that now for the community.
Great, thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry. So I had a couple of thoughts as everybody was talking, and I think we're on this 300 number, and I remember Mrs. Kelly, you brought this up, that you're in a high, I have the general plan here, handy dandy. I was thinking maybe if you're like located within the central business district or within like so many feet of the central business district, then maybe the distances could be shorter. It was interesting when she was saying on McCorkle, there's so many there, and there are, a lot of visitors already. It is pretty much a high tourist area. It's like, so, maybe it's not 300 across the board in the whole area, whatever you call that number, the urban limit line or something, city of St. Helena, but maybe it's within the central business district, or maybe it's the higher density. I don't know what the exact thing that would drive that. But then I want to take Tom Belt's comment about single family residences. Maybe it's a little farther apart there. As you said, 5 houses is not very much. But I guess the thing is, there is a cap. So it's not like every 5 houses would be there. So I don't know, just something to consider, that maybe it's not just 300 everywhere, but maybe there's some kind of, relative number that can help guide that. I think there's, I guess, in the max days, I don't know if there needs to be one, but it was just thrown up. And I was thinking, is if there are a limited number, say it stays 25 or incrementally goes up to 50, whatever the number, it's a max. So then I'm trying to understand, is there a max time you can hold a permit? Because if you can constantly renew, then that spot will never open up for someone on the wait list, and it might make you use that more wisely, or plan to use it more wisely, when you really want to use it and need it. I don't know. Just say you maxed it out at 10 years. Like, that gives you a lot of time to use it. And say you don't want to use it, you can always put your name back in the wait list or something like that, and just say that's so I don't really know the right answer. It's just that when you think of a max number, then and there's 62 on the wait list right now, it really would take somebody to give up the STR in order to get one. Even if we go to 50, there's still going to be people on the wait list, right? And there's probably going to be more people doing it. So maybe there's like some incentive to do a max, just so that that there's, you know, a turnover, and you can always reapply and put your name back in the wait list. I do want to bring up, somebody had commented on transferable. I feel like it was Jordan Coonrad. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. But is that part of the item, you know, like the discussion today of like, if you were to sell your house?
You can comment on whether you think that is whether we would consider changing the current code on that.
Yeah.
That's part of this discussion.
Okay. What is it now, and what
Sure.
is the discussion on transfer?
Sure. So through Vice Chair Lisa McKyle, Director, currently it is not transferable, and that was a decision that the city very clearly made. And I think I can professionally understand why that language exists and why the city chose to put that. It's up to the pleasure of the commission when the time comes to recommend to the city council as a majority whether that's changed or not, and ultimately up to the city council. But currently, the provision is that it's not transferable.
Like, so if you sell your house, it doesn't go to the new owner. Okay.
Yeah,
I just want to,
transferable means a lot of different things. It's not
Okay.
just selling your house.
like,
So
what other things?
I'm the present owner and the present short-term rental operator. I hold the permit as Lisa McKyle, and once I'm no longer operating, it cannot go to Jackie, my sister. She's not my sister, by the
Yes.
way. But
Okay.
it's not transferable. That's the interpretation currently under the ordinance.
Okay.
I do appreciate that, an exploration of that. And I do know that in some other cities they are. I don't know that I feel strongly one way or another. I'm kind of, as long as if it was transferable, that it undergoes, that's contingent on undergoing a full application. So the new owner would have to go through all, submit everything that's required of a new applicant.
Yeah, I think we can look at that, and it is an item that I asked staff to look at. There's some options out there. Maybe in light of what I'm hearing a lot of different perspectives. But how often would somebody hold on to a permit, and how long could that be? And perhaps you can transfer it once and not 50 times over, however long. So I think that there's some opportunity there to really come up with something reasonable.
I think the one, at least from when I read this public comment, it was talking about sale of the property. And given that it sounds like it was important that people wouldn't buy a new home knowing that they can just go into STR, that it seems like people have been waiting on the wait list for a really long time, that to not just transfer it based off sale, and then that kind of negates the whole wait list concept, and not people buying properties just to then do STRs. So I wanted to address the comment because we had not talked about it yet tonight. I understand this person also said, the applicant would have to apply, they would want to do it and all that stuff. I think in fairness, and I guess thinking about the community and what the community has said about just making sure that people aren't buying houses just to do STRs, that I guess in this sense, I wouldn't want it to be transferred upon sale of a home.
I tend to agree.
I'd agree with that too. It hadn't come up, but I don't think it might even make the property more valuable to somebody. Oh, yeah, this is tied into that, and I could see why they didn't do it, and I think that people waiting is a priority. Even if I don't know, let's say I was doing that, pass away, and my wife or somebody wants to, they have to reapply. That's the way the cookie crumbles, right? The next person comes in and they stay in line. I just don't think that's right.
I want to say another thing that is different than what is kind of the rhetoric that we're hearing, and that we want families to come. I know, at least from personal experience, I use Verbos because I have a son and he needs to run around, and it's like, it's nice to have a little backyard or something. You know, there is, for families, there, you know, that gives them kind of a different way of visiting a place than just going to a hotel. And again, I don't want to like worsen hotels, you know, occupancy, because we rely on the TOT there and we already have them here, you know, have hotels here. Finding the right balance. But I think it's nice to have variety. And what I say is that from experience, I'll go to Verbos and stay, and I like experiencing the neighborhoods, the residential neighborhoods, and actually walking around and exploring it rather than being in the downtown character corridor at a hotel in the, like, you know, central business district. Sometimes you want to go into a neighborhood and experience the character, and it passes my mind, like, would I want to move there? You know, like, it's beautiful. This place is beautiful. Like, and it's a different experience than a hotel. Nothing against hotels. We use hotels too.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think that I do a lot of renting of homes when I travel. And I do get to meet some of the neighbors. So I think it can be. And in this town, I'm sure there's a lot of that going on, where people are engaging, you know, renters are engaging with the people around them and the owners around them.
I also think that having a house, sometimes for kids, it's nice to have a kitchen, because then you don't have to eat out every meal. It can get pricey. Like, if I were staying here and I wanted to stay longer, sometimes I might want to just cook my breakfast, or I might want to cook a lunch, and then maybe we go out for dinner or something. And it's not to say, like, I don't want to support the community, like restaurants here, but I just think that I'm speaking from a family perspective because I have a son, but it allows us to stay longer when we have a little bit more space, and there's like flexibility with meals, and in that sense it is a little bit more affordable, because some of it is kind of passed through living in a house, and we can make our own coffee and make our own pancakes in the house using their, you know, their kitchen. But, you know, I think it's just to find the right balance for the community to support everybody. And so.
Thank you, Commissioner Covell. I do have one other thing I wanted to bring up, and that is I also would be very open to looking at part of that TOT if we know how to make that work, going to our affordable housing fund. So again, that all depends on some of the data that we get. You know, what is it bringing in? What's the potential for new? But I like the idea of some percentage to be determined going into our affordable housing unit fund.
Yes, we heard that, especially I think through Miss Mary Stevens, and so that's something that we'll be looking at. We'll have to look at the laws around taxes as well, but and any agreements that exist. But I think that the City Council will be very interested in that as well.
Right. I mean, maybe all the TOT goes straight to the city, and the city parsons out that percentage. I don't know how.
So
I don't know how that works.
That's not how. I just want to be transparent on this item in case people are watching or listening. TOT does not come straight to the city. It goes through a whole process to the county, and then there's a percentage that comes back. But we can certainly investigate options and opportunities.
Great. Well, I think, is there anything else?
I just was thinking about the primary owner short-term rentals, that maybe the distance doesn't apply, and if there, even with the owner there, if there is any type, maybe it could be clouded with if there's any violation, noise violation, or reports to the police officer, then that could be maybe more disciplinary revoked to stop that compilation. But I think something could be balanced where we prioritize those that are monitoring their own area, as opposed, because anything could happen in a open house that they say they're there and then they're just renting it out, and obviously nobody wants to get it damaged, but that's what brings the noise or the unfriendly stuff at times, I assume. But with more data, I'd be more willing to let more expansion happen with owner-occupied short-term rentals within shorter distances, so it doesn't compile, and that it would accelerate that process of people needing that extra income and being more responsible homeowners and helping out the families.
Great. Thank you. I think we've given you a few things to consider, and we'll look forward. I have one question about process, and that is, will we see any of the data before you come back to us with a recommendation on updates to the ordinance, or will that happen at the same time?
To be determined. I do want to just quickly thank the commission and the public again for this absolutely fantastic feedback. It's so helpful for us to make sure that when we're coming back, you're able to make informed decisions. I'm a data person as well, so data sometimes is very easy to get and sometimes it's not easy to get, particularly for households. And I think Vice Chair Furtick noted this, getting all the vacancy rates and it being reliable information is, et cetera, who's renting, who's not. That can be a little more complicated. We'll do our best effort to see what information we get. How we get data and how much data we're getting can prolong the process. And so I think that's important for the public to understand in the commission. We want fast turnaround. We've been moving pretty quickly for this process. We're getting all of the information. Now we have to go do some of the work. And so our tentative schedule was to come back, fall, winter. And so that's still going to be our North Star goal. But that may move because of the lack of getting proper data, or you have to go to different places to get data. Some are responsive, some aren't.
Yeah.
And so we'll do our best to come back. To answer your question directly, it's to be determined. I would say that if we're able to get information and we're in a good place, we're probably going to do another outreach meeting like we did to present what our findings were.
Okay.
And then we would do that again before the commission, and then come back the following meeting for the formality.
I want to bring up one thing. I think I emailed earlier about kind of why this is coming about now, and I think I remembered going back to November 18, 2025, that there was a short-term rental where the person, I think, did not report all of their TOT. I think there was a fine, and that was discussed at City Council. And I had asked staff to kind of look into it to understand that better. And I know everybody keeps, at least from the presentation, it's like the honor system, self-reporting. And even people who have STRs, they're like, we're all in for the honor system, like not just using honor system, but getting the platform so that it is, you don't get to bypass that on like the system. So in that sense, some of this is, I think, in discussion, at least from my perspective of seeing that project and the City Council, and I wanted to understand if there was a lawsuit or not. But, these are things that would hopefully create less of these situations that cost the town money in meetings and staff time and all that kind of stuff. And so rather than you guys feeling like you have to be the police, you're not like, that's not in your job title, at least from my understanding. So I think part of like, you know, I wish honor system would work. But, you know, I think if the platform protects everyone, both the STR and the town, by having that transparency and kind of removing the whole like potential breaking of the honor system, then I think it's really important. And I think one of the data points for me was kind of understanding that scenario, that project, and understanding what happened and what that cost the city and whatnot. And, you know, it's a data point. So, and another reason why we would make edits to this, so.
Through the chair, Vice Chair Furtick, I would like to just also dispel any concerns or beliefs that there's a sentiment on behalf of staff of coming in with a bureaucratic outlook on this. That's not at all our approach or desire in this instance. It's to equal efficiency and access where reasonable and balance accountability on all parts. And so to hold a permit for a short-term rental is a benefit. It's a benefit to the person holding the permit. It's a benefit to the city who's receiving the revenue from a taxing perspective. It's a benefit to the local businesses who you presume people will go out and eat and go to museums and wineries, etc. The rules are there in order to hopefully encourage that neighborhoods are still maintaining that neighborhood feeling. And so I just want to, I do want to dispel, and this didn't come from Commissioner Covell, it came from some comments. We're not looking at this to be bureaucratic. We're looking at it to equal efficiency through new technologies, reporting abilities, and making sure that if you hold this permit, the city is getting the proper tax revenue based on what you're actually renting it out to be.
I have not heard those comments, so certainly not the way I feel. I hope.
No, I don't think anybody in the commission,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure that the public understands we're not trying to be bureaucratic.
Yeah. And I think the thing that we're doing here right now is gathering community input and knowing the guardrails that we want to put on this and make sure from what the general plan says, what we hold really high in our community. We live here. We love our community for the reason why we live here for that reason. And it's important for us to keep it thriving or encourage thriving and support that. And that's, you know, not just the businesses, but for families. And I think it's really important. I hear that loud and clear. We don't want to displace long-term units, affordable housing. We don't want to become a town where it's just only tourists, and because then our town wouldn't be the town it is. And I think that's what the input is really helpful. And I think some of the back and forth from people actually kind of dispel the comment that this is displacing. Some of it is just helping people stay here. So I think, we kind of have to listen to that perspective and find the right balance, like thrive, but also be very safe about protecting what we have. And I think we all really feel strongly about what we have here. So that's what I have to say.
Great, thank you. So I think we've concluded this agenda item. We've given you the feedback. You have plenty to work with. We look forward to having you come back in the fall and have more community outreach as well, perhaps before that.
Fall, winter.
Oh, fall. Oh. I just automatically move things up, but fall, winter. So we can move on to the next agenda item. Are there any reports by staff?
No reports. The last agenda item, the only thing I would report is that we had outreach meeting, but through that item, we notified the commission for short-term rentals.
Great. Then do you want to talk at all about the agenda forecast?
Sure. We have on July 7th through this evening's continuance, the ADU agenda item that will come back before you all, and shortly thereafter will go to the city council. So it is agendized for the city council as well. We are trying to move this through as quickly as possible because we know that it's very important. And then there's also, interestingly enough, a new short-term rental permit coming forward. And so you'll see that. It'll be interesting after having today's conversation.
Right.
And then on the 21st, so far, we have a major design review that's coming before the commission, and that's what we have so far.
Okay, and there will probably be the application probably on the website for that already? Maybe not.
For the
July 21st
I'm
major
not
design
sure.
review? Okay, no problem.
Hopefully that was deemed complete. I will note that staff's working on creating a planning commission work plan, and that's something that will hopefully ultimately go to the city council. And what it does is it keeps us all on our own agendas of what we're working on within staff's abilities. And so we're working on that. It'll be reporting out what the successes were over the prior year, and then it will lay a foundation and a roadmap of what we think is coming into the following year. So
Great. So I would just like to add an agenda item for the future, which we've talked about, which is what like a planning department dashboard might look like on the website, so that there's more transparency, better understanding about where projects are in the process and who's responsible for next steps. Hopefully that would eliminate a lot of inquiries, to staff, and certainly speculation in the community, of which we sometimes have a lot. And so, yes, I'd love to see what a dashboard might look like. And don't feel like you have to. My suggestion would be, don't feel like you have to dot every I and cross every T, in terms of creating a model for that. Don't let perfect be the enemy of, however that saying goes. Maybe get something up sooner that we can build on. So something that, can be built out.
Yes, so that's definitely something that the department will look at. And for the items that the commission looks at, I just need some clarification. Are you referring to items that the commission would look at and that's in the purview of the commission? Or are you requesting that there's a greater effort? We wouldn't necessarily bring the department's version of a dashboard before the commission, but are you asking for... Can you clarify a little bit more for me?
Yes, I think there's an opportunity for us to better communicate with the community about projects that come to the commission and that don't come to the commission, both. It could apply to both, but I just see it as an opportunity in general.
Understood.
I know that myself, when I'm sometimes looking at things that do come before the planning commission, or that, are coming to the planning commission, and then the next step would be to the city council, but there's a lot of steps in between that. And sometimes I'm curious and I go in and see where it's at, and I'm unclear about where it's at.
Yes, that's something that we're looking at. Is a dashboard. We're already looking at doing that, but I can bring forward potentially what a dashboard could look like for upcoming planning commission items. technology. Again, we're a small team, and so that requires technology and talking to our permitting systems. And it may not be as soon as you
Sure.
desire, but it is something that we're looking at.
That's on your radar.
Yes, I like dashboards as well because I do think that they help reduce the number of inquiries that maybe are unnecessary inquiries where the public calls and then they leave a voicemail and then you have to try and make contact with them and sometimes you miss them. And so it provides that transparency that the public's seeking.
Great.
I
Okay.
have things. You mentioned small staff, and last time Zinnia is gone. I'm curious to know if there's any information on whether or not there's going to be a potential hire for that position. And then I have one more other thing. I wanted to report that I've Napa County's general plan. There is a multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan that was a draft. It's 1,500 pages, and I've digested all of it, most of it, and I had a meeting with you too, and Chief Sorensen. And it's, I think it's not, I just want to put it up for topic as an agenda item, and as more of a work session than, anything, because it's related to us in St. Helena. And it's a hazard mitigation plan. And as we know, hazards, they don't see boundary lines and jurisdictions. And so this thing is analyzing it cumulatively in Napa County. And I think it's a very informative document. And I think it would be really good for St. Helenans to know more about it, read it, and for the Planning Commission to read it. And as it ties into our general plan as well. And so I just want to bring it up as an agenda item for public workshop session.
So that I understand, what would we do with that? In other words, an agenda,
Through the vice chair. So that item is not an item that would be under the purview of the Planning Commission and, its basic charter. That being said, what I can request is that the entity, so I've done this in previous jurisdictions, when it's a topic area that impacts how you make decisions in other areas, general plan amendments, overall general plan updates, et cetera, future projects that are approved, I'll invite them to come give a presentation so that it's an informative, more educational type of presentation. There's no guarantee. But
nice idea, yeah.
Yeah, I can always reach out to have them to see if they'll come and speak to you all. Generally speaking, most like to come. And hopefully it's a feel good for them because they're coming as a courtesy. But they do like to hear the feedback. And so I think that's a great request. I can't get it on your agenda to deliberate and approve and all of that stuff, but I can get it as an informational item, hopefully.
Great. Super. Okay. With that, the meeting is adjourned, and I'm going to use the gavel.